Welcome to Wednesday evening, folks. Cup of Joe with Joe, and it is a good day. Now, I know some of you have been real busy looking at all the events over this last week, and honestly, it's been an incredible week. Um, Now, I'm not going to say that it's been incredible in the good way because it really hasn't. But there are changes, and when there is change, there is opportunity for growth. There is opportunity to make a better world out of what has come our way, because we recognize the need for change and we recognize the opportunity that change creates for creating that better world. So, with that in mind, one of the things that we want to go ahead and bring up, or I want to go ahead and bring up, something that's been brought to my attention, is the idea of immigration reform. Um, One of the topics of many tonight, well, four, um, is, of course, naturally immigration reform. It's a national policy issue simply because it was created a national policy clear back in 1851. When the federal government decided that it needed to create a concise means for all of the states to be able to handle immigration, determine who was an American citizen, as opposed to who was a state resident when it came to voting rights in the United States. Yeah, so that happened clear back 1850s-ish. And yeah. Now, one of the problems that we have right now in the United States, and this is particular when it comes to human rights violations, is the natural human right to travel. The ability to go where you want, when you want, where you want, at any time, simply because you are human. Now, there's an awful lot of people out there that say, well, no, they're not American citizens, so they don't have freedom to travel within the United States. There is nothing in the Constitution that denies travel into the United States. So your constitutional protection from immigration doesn't exist, folks. It's not in there. The laws that have been written in the time since has largely been the result of nationalism and other means and nativism in order to control who has rights to the land. Now, I use that in the term privileges. The reason why is because when you deny one group their rights, what you've done is you've created privilege for another group. And now these are things that go along the lines of the 3/5 compromise in the Constitution, in which the United States determined that if you were a indentured servant and or slave, for population count, you are only going to be counted as 3/5. One is because the southern states didn't allow you to have voting rights, yet they still wanted to be able to count you towards the population for representation. Is one of those ironic things, because taxation without representation was one of the cornerstones of the founding of the United States. Yet here we were. This is going to drive me crazy, Mom. Yet here we are, denying people representation because they were considered property of someone else, and giving that someone else an effective proxy vote without the consent of the slaves and or indentured servants. One of those violations of the Declaration of Independence that was inherent in the way we wrote the Constitution of the United States. This whole idea of life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness for all. Well, no, only if you're white, male, and landed. right? Thank you, Lena. Definitely, everybody share, like, let your friends know that yes, I am on tonight. We are talking. Okay. Now, why that applies today is because we've come back full circle. Now, one of the big human rights stories of last week, and in a sense, it's still center to a significant number of discussions, is a 10-year-old girl in Ohio. Reason why is because this young girl, her condition um, was the result of an Ecuadorian immigrant. Okay. Now, Ohio isn't going to do this the way Texas and California like to do it. Well, at least California. California, when an immigrant commits a violent crime in California and they're undocumented in the U.S., what California likes to do is just send them back across the border. Well, that lasts all in good until they come right back across the border, undocumented, again, to commit more crimes. Okay, we have heard stories of that time and time again coming out of California. Ohio ain't going to play that game. They put him on $2 million bail. He's going to sit and rot. He's already confessed. Lawyers will probably still work on the 5th, whether or not he was properly Mirandized, all of that. But at the end of the day, he's guilty. And honestly, he's probably safer inside because he's been named. He's been named. He goes back out into the civilian population, out into public, with a record of having impregnated a 10-year-old girl. Yeah, that's not going to go over well with a significant portion of the population, especially considering I don't even know what we're talking about with regards to his status. I don't know whether, as an Ecuadorian, he was here illegally or undocumented, I should say, or whether or not he'd actually come in through proper channels. Lana, some of the crimes that we're talking about with regards to the deportation, these aren't possession crimes, these aren't drug crimes, these aren't nonviolent crimes. California has had a problem with deporting violent criminals, rapists, murderers, and so forth. Reason why is because they'd rather deport them than actually deal with the trouble of going through a long drawn out court case where it's not just the ACLU getting involved, but when it's like the Mexican consulate getting involved and providing lawyers for their citizens. So California, as a general rule, doesn't spend an, doesn't like dealing with that aspect of the international law and, immigration. Now, that is one of the things we can bring up with regards to the Ohio case, because the Ecuadorian individual could seek out assistance from the Ecuadorian consulate in Ohio as far as trying to do legal, number of other things like that. However, based on the available evidence, I don't see the Ecuadorian consulate being, too keen on facilitating his defense beyond trying to make sure he doesn't get the death penalty. For all the good that's going to do. Now, what this means with an awful lot of things is, in this particular case, the Ecuadorian who was involved with the 10-year-old girl, a lot of people like to come back and say, well, he didn't assimilate. Correct. He didn't. Because we really don't put an awful lot of effort into assimilation. We don't put an awful lot of effort into integrating into American culture, integrating into American society, and making sure that people understand that violent criminal acts and what they are is well understood. From an Ecuadorian perspective, his admission basically was, yeah, I did it. What's wrong? Well, in the United States of America, knocking up a 10-year-old girl is very, very wrong. You don't necessarily know what, yeah, anyway. But this keeps coming back to how do we integrate, how do we bring them in? And of course, one of the things an awful lot of people like to talk about when it comes to illegal immigration is the caravans that come up from the south, the cartels that control the flow of migrants over undocumented paths under yeah. Um, hey, Dolores, thank you. But yeah, Elena. The coyotes that bring the individuals, the illegal, the undocumented immigrants over the border through means that an awful lot of people don't like because it keeps them undocumented. Um, because we have such harsh policies, because we make it so difficult to become integrated into the American workforce, whether it's by agricultural visas or H-1B visas or a number of other methods, we have people who sneak in. And once they're in, they're provided fake social security cards, fake birth certificates. They're allowed to get introduced into the workforce as somebody they are not. They continue to contribute to a social security insurance program that they will never actually be able to collect on. Number of individuals have found themselves with stolen identities and social security incomes well in excess of what they'd planned, simply because there were two people paying on that social security number. That's not fair to the immigrants that are working on it. And it really isn't fair to the individuals who are benefiting. Reason why is because there's some backdoor issues with regards to that. Immigration reform. It's one of those things we need to do because the easier it is to gain entry into the United States and become integrated, culturally integrated into what it is to be an American, is what it is to be part of the U.S. workforce. Immigrants into the United States are already recognized as being responsible for less crime per capita than those people who were born native to the United States. This is a fact. As such, we should work to facilitate bringing those people in who want to work. They do, and they want to do jobs. You're Native American, you're native citizen of the United States, does not want to do agriculture, domestics, maid work, restaurants. Yeah, they're taking jobs. They're taking jobs nobody wants, folks. Let's bring them in, put them to work. They want to work. Let's make it happen. They want to be upstanding citizens of the United States. Let's facilitate. Let's not make them go through coyotes. Let's not make them sustain sexual assaults, rapes, and various forms of trauma by depending upon outlaws and criminals in order to cross the border into the United States. The easier it is for a white market border crossing, the less involved the black market will be in making sure those things happen. And the cost and trauma and damage to communities and families that the black market causes as part of bringing those human beings across the border who want to be Americans. We can reduce that. We can take care of the widows. We can take care of the orphans. We can find them jobs. We can find them work. We can find them housing, and we can find them food. Beautiful thing is we don't even need to tax anybody to do that because the churches want to help. The nonprofits want to help. We, as human beings, want to help our fellow human beings find safety, find security, find the things they need in order to be comfortable becoming a U.S. resident and a U.S. citizen. And also makes them part of a community where they stop, where they will not, do not want to commit the violent crimes that are part of the culture that brings them across the border into poverty. So immigration reform, it's a big thing. It needs to happen if we're going to break the back of the cartels, if we're going to break the back of the coyotes, if we're going to break the back of the human trafficking rings. They're part of, crossing the borders into the United States along the southern border, several of the others. Let's go ahead and take a look. What else do we got coming up here? Okay. Now this one's interesting. Farmers' protest. Let's talk about the farmers' protest in Europe right now. Okay. Now I'm done with the last one. Let's go ahead and do this. Okay, the farmers' protest that we're dealing with right now in Europe. Now, reason why the farmers' protest is going on is because there have been threats made to farmers that their lands will be seized if they're not able to reduce their carbon signature adequately. Okay. Now, this is ironic. Reason why is because people who are saying that they need to reduce the carbon signature of their cows are flying in private jets around the world to talk about cow farts. Right. The carbon footprint of those private jets exceed the carbon footprint of the farms they're shutting down. If anybody should be giving up anything, especially in this world of the internet, where you and I can have a conversation like this halfway around the world, all the way around the world, go around the world and back again. We can have this conversation. Why do they need to be flying jets into Rome, flying jets into Buenos Aires, flying jets into Stockholm, flying jets into London and Washington, D.C., having world summits in China and Moscow? Sounds to me like they got a slightly different agenda than that. The thing is we've seen some of this talk about it. We've seen an attempt to normalize the idea that someone with no farm experience can farm. And we can just turn over 1 billion acres to Bill Gates. He's magically going to be able to produce food for, 300 million people as a result. Doesn't actually work that way. Stalin and Trotsky tried it. Mao tried it. Several others over the years have tried it. Bloomberg tried to convince us he could teach a city boy how to farm. Yeah, no. This is one of the things that was actually brought up. Reason why is because even the best farmers in the world, the most seasoned farmers in the world, they're part of a collective. They are part of a group. Okay. And when you bring in people that disrupt the ecology, that disrupt the environment around an experienced farmer's farm, it really doesn't matter how good the farmer is, because now that farmer has to deal with circumstances he was not prepared for. It's one of the things in the 1930s during the Dust Bowl. when Kansas was going up. We had a lot of heritage farmers. We had an awful lot of farmers with strong backgrounds, family histories. And we had people like the Ukrainian gulags, who were starved to death during the Holodomor. We had that kind of skill. We had that kind of background in the breadbasket of America. And we also had homesteaders who were sent out and given land that surrounded these established farmers. And they disrupted water rights. They disrupted terrain features. They disrupted windbreaks. Basically, they went in and did an awful lot of things without an understanding of the land, the environment, and the biomes that they were affecting. As a result, we ended up with one of the worst famines. And this was a global famine, 1930s. Not so different from what we're about to go through again. Well, but 1930s, it was a global famine. You had the Holodomor that starved out the Ukrainians. You had Mao, who's working on, what was going on in China. You had the Dust Bowl in the United States because our conservation programs were disrupted by homesteaders that were granted significant plots of land that they didn't understand how to farm properly or how to farm in coordination with the established farmers. Here we are. We're fast tracking that again. The reason why is because we're about to lose. Yes, we are. We are about to lose significant amount of our ability to produce food because we will no longer be able to produce it in the same way we've done for the last 50 years as a result of the Green Revolution. Okay? Now, I've talked about the Green Revolution before. The Green Revolution wasn't actually that green. The reason why is because it was an extremely equipment-heavy, petrol-based style of farming. Chemically dependent upon herbicides, insecticides, pesticides. It wasn't what we'd call a regenerative or earth-friendly style of agriculture. But it worked because we were able to supplement heavily. We were able to mine for supplements like phosphates that we integrated into the ground. The pesticides that allowed us to monocrop. Fertilizers that allowed us to monocrop year after year after year. Without establishing a root system, a core system, those things that we consider to be part of a regenerative agricultural process. Here we are. We're about to lose access to fuels that allow us to run the machinery that does the industrial farming in the bulk of the United States. Okay? Our John Deere tractors are going to be rationed the fuel that they're allowed to burn in order to create the food that we eat. Which means we have to make up the balance with labor, with people, with hands on the farms. Go back to a little bit of old school. Doing the handiwork. Again, people in the fields. Not machines, but people. People that will need to be fed as they worked. Collecting the food that will go out to the rest of the world. There's ways to do it. Each individual community is going to have to come up with their own. It's one of the things I like about where I live in Western Idaho. Here in the Treasure Valley, we have strong history of religious-based farmers, conservative values, not to be confused with statist authoritarian values, mind you. And very few of the people that were involved in settling this area wanted the kind of laws that we currently enjoy here in the state of Idaho. These are people with a strong sense of charity, strong sense of community, and a definitive ability and desire to work. Yes, that old church-going work ethic where we as people want to work, want to help, want to create, want to build community, want to build homes, want to build farms, want to harvest the food we eat. Something we're actually going to have to start doing again here fairly soon, unless the federal government, which doesn't seem to be correcting its particular path, pulls its head out of its fourth point of contact and reverses some of its decisions that it plans on making with regards to the environmental emergency executive order that Joe Biden currently wants to sign. Okay. Keep in mind, a lot of this is all about the same thing. It's about the climate emergency. It's about climate change. It's about the fact that we are creating drought and we are running out of the resources necessary because climate is changing, with or without us. It doesn't matter. The climate is changing. Doesn't matter whether it's human caused or whether it's natural, whether it's cyclical. The climate is changing. And we aren't adapting fast enough. So the idea that the federal government, the global government, the United Nations, World Health Organization, all of the rest of those parties, all of the rest of those individuals have come together and decided is that they know best. So we're going to get a universal policy that applies in Siberia, applies in Ukraine, applies in Northern Ireland, applies in Idaho, applies in Nebraska, applies in South Dakota, applies in Arizona. Okay. Anybody who understands what universal policy means when it's applied in a place that the policy wasn't designed to be applied in understands that, yeah, universal policy doesn't work. New World Order wants the whole world yeah, Trump would do with emergency powers. Yeah, well, that's an interesting thing. Joe Biden has proven himself to be a segregationist and an authoritarian since the day he joined national politics back in 1970s. He's a leopard that isn't going to change his spots, tiger that's not going to change his stripes. He is who he is, and he will always revert back to that. And yes, when it comes to the executive order and what it means as far as the emergency actions, his expectations for the poor to moderate, for the poor to sacrifice, for the poor to ration their needs, while the rich continue to get in their private jets and fly around the world and fist bump in order to buy enough oil to keep our agricultural rigs producing food on farmland that's burnt out. Under the control, people like Bill Gates, Mike Bloomberg, who know nothing about farming. Yeah. Probably not going to be a good time to realize that they're in the process of making a mistake. And again, you guys know where I'm going with most of this. This is about community building. This is about localization, about decentralization. When the orders come down for us to start rationing in given areas, a lot of this is going to mean that the cattle that is raised in Idaho will be collected and relocated somewhere else where somebody who doesn't understand supply chain thinks it's more important the cattle be than where they were raised. You're going to see people shifting food supplies to people who aren't producing, while the people who do produce are starving because someone has an idea that won't actually apply, yet it will be law. Okay. These are the things communities need to resist. These are the things when people come and say it's time to move the cattle. No, it's not. The cattle stay where it feeds the people who raised it. What's left over can go. We have Ukrainians here in the state of Idaho. Left Ukraine during the Holodomor. Left Ukraine when Stalin was in charge of the Ukraine. Let's see, Mike. 140 separate powers, same ones used to establish Japanese American internment camps, suspension of habeas corpus, fuel, Uber, steel rationing, preemptive arrests, detainment, mass censorship. Okay. For those of you who are paying attention to what's going on in Ukraine right now, okay, Ukraine is the test scenario for something that has not been tried in the United States in over 70 years. Okay. We made some attempts at it. The Patriot Act, the 3 strikes you're law, or 3 strikes you're outlaw for criminal behavior. You know, some of the other things that we've done are detention of reporters like Julian Assange. You know, censorship. We're already practicing what to do with the Border Patrol. Let's see, what is it? It's the BCP. Border and anyway, BCP. 100 miles from any international border, international waters, or international airport is a constitution-free zone for the BCP. Good point, Mike. Yes. Why was it so important to legalize same-sex marriage during an invasion of the Ukraine? Okay. Now, this is interesting. Reason why is because, yes, we recognize same-sex marriage is in danger because of what was going on with the Supreme Court. Yet, rather than using a state body, the federal government, Congress, to address the issue of bodily autonomy of women, we've decided to stress the issue of whether or not people of the same sex can get married. We didn't focus on bodily autonomy. We focused on gay marriage, not lesbian marriage, gay marriage. Okay, what well-to-do men want to do with each other. Uh, Men who make lots of money because they don't have children to spend it on. Men who, like Pete Buttigieg and his husband, are able to afford to contract gestational carriers, women, womb bearers, in order to have children for them. Important to make sure that they have the right to get married. But we're not paying attention to bodily autonomy of women. It's an interesting one. And the Ukrainian government's held a special session of parliament to legalize it. Nothing against the LGBT. Ukrainians are fighting for their life. Okay. Not our issue, mind you. Not our issue. We shouldn't be sending them money. We shouldn't be sending them troops. We shouldn't be sending them aid. Because the troops, the aid, the weapons that we send just make the situation worse. Yeah, I get the whole Putin is a Nazi thing. We're still continuing to make the situation worse. We're still continuing to exacerbate it. And we literally say, we will give you $8 billion, but you got to make LGBTQ marriage legal in the Ukraine. Okay. That's one of the other things. In the early days of the invasion of Ukraine, there were stories about the hospitals. Remember the children's hospitals where the children were kept. They were separated from the mothers. They were separated from the families. Okay, now this is one of those things that's interesting. The reason why is because Ukraine did not have any regulations or laws regarding gestational carriers. So you were looking at what was basically a free-for-all in the human trade market. Okay, literally, they could trade babies. They could come in, pay a woman $30,000, and she would take an embryo, gestational carrier, produce a kid, turn it over to a total stranger, and that was okay in the Ukraine. And the reason why they were using the Ukraine was because India caught on to what they were doing there and made gestational carriers illegal in India, which of course opened the opportunity wide for gestational carriers in the Ukraine or in Ukraine. Got to work on that one. It's Ukraine now because Ukraine it's not the Ukraine, which is a subsection of the USSR. It is Ukraine, Ukrainian. Okay. But gestational carriers in Ukraine early on. Yes, Sandy. Subservient. Baby making business. To be honest, Sandy, you're the only ones who can make the babies. That's still the case. Sweden and Finland into NATO. That continues to exacerbate the NATO-Russia conflict as we continue to watch things develop in Ukraine. It's going to be a problem. It's going to continue, and we continue to push it. We continue to facilitate the move towards World War III, which, if we do go there, that is a global depopulation event. That is an extermination agenda. we will see the population of the world reduced significantly as a result. War, modern war, is a eugenics program. Unfortunately, as a eugenics program, it's a failure because it destroys the best that the nations have to offer, because we draft the best to send them forward to fight the best of another nation. In effect, destroying the best that the world has to offer, destroying those who believe in defense, who believe in creating a better world, who believe that they're fighting to create a better world for people. The Malthusian dystopia. When Kynes and Malthus meet, the world suffers. Okay, you meant that R. We are betters. Are our betters. Are our betters Malthusians? Well, one, they're not our betters. They like to think so. We know different. They're human. They put on their shoes 1 foot at a time. They put on their pants 1 leg at a time. They shit their depends in front of the Pope, probably a little more often than we do. Yes, oligarchs are Malthusians. The oligarchs are Keynesians. The oligarchs, for some reason, think both go well together. Supply side economics. Welcome to modern America and the 90-day maximized profit planning. Because that's unfortunately where we're at right now. Ukrainian government recently released a video, and it's actually pretty good. If it wasn't for the OCP overtones from the 1980s movie RoboCop. But they talk about AI-assisted bureaucracy. They talk about a cashless society. Talk about the social credit system, the ability of mass transit, the AI-controlled food production system so that everybody eats. Everybody is taken care of. Everybody gets the medical care they need. Third quarter going to be lit. Absolutely. Absolutely. Third quarter, July, August, September, and right up into October. Month 10, that third quarter, it is going to be lit. Everything's coming down right now in the third quarter. We're looking at, we're looking at an awful lot of things. We're looking at the executive order for the climate emergency. We're looking at farmers' protests, farmers being dislocated by bankers who want the land in order to change ownership and who's allowed to farm it, work it, produce it, because they all have this idea that an AI is going to be able to farm the land better than the farmers were able to farm the land. Control is going to shift that way. Thing is, it's not the farmers programming the AIs to farm. It's people like Bloomberg and Trotsky. It's probably not going to go over as well as some people would like. Ukraine. War in the third quarter. The 90-day planning cycle, folks. The 90-day planning cycle. Okay. 100 years since we rejected government by technocracy. That was into World War I. 1918. Yes, techno-totalitarian authoritarianism. It's coming. It was coming. It was one of those progressive ideas that was inevitable, like a train wreck. Thing is the technocracy that we have right now, the individuals who are in charge of it, people like Gates, Bezos, Zuckerberg, Bloomberg, even of all people, an awful lot of their followers as a result. They are embracing the techno-totalitarian authoritarianism. Whew, that is a mouthful. Reason why is because they believe it can save the world, believe it can save the community, that as long as everybody complies with what is produced by their artificial intelligence will save the homogenized culture that is left over. Remember, you must comply to survive. It's coming, folks. You must comply to survive. The ability to stay housed will depend on your ability to comply. Ability to receive food based on your ability to comply. There will be no culture, only compliance. Dude, that's a good one. New dictatorship and a dopamine hit of upvotes like, we're just cocaine addicted rats in a box. Well, we are. I hate to say it, but we've proven it time again. We are nothing more than a bunch of cocaine addicted rats in a box. Reason why is because we've divorced ourselves from community. We've divorced ourselves from utopia rat world, which of course wasn't managed and maintained by the rats. It was managed and maintained by the utopian overlords, who would occasionally cull the excess rats that, and as long as rats were happy with their dopamine fixes and were able to run around, participate, and interact with other rats in positive ways in the parks and the habit trails and all of that, they weren't nearly as cocaine addicted as the ones that were left alone in a box by themselves with a beaker full of cocaine-laced water. Anyway, long live the ESG, because that is where they want to go. Folks, we can do better. We need to do better. We need to stand up as communities. We need to stand up as humans in respect to the diversity that has allowed us to survive. Compliance always has been and always will be a dead end. A culture in permanent compliance does not adapt. It is not socially fit to survive changing times, changing eras, changing beliefs, changing understandings. It doesn't give the depth of diversity. It doesn't give the depth of culture. It doesn't give the depth of knowledge and understanding and compassion we need in order to survive as a species. Compliance is not only a human rights violation, it's a death trap. So pay attention as that comes down the pipe, folks. Pay attention. Build your network. Build your friends. Build diversity. Welcome strangers. Welcome the opportunity that is created through a culture of consent and a culture of diversity, a culture of welcome that creates the flexibility to survive as a race as a species the dangers that are coming our way. Be good to each other is really what it comes down to. You know, what else we got here? Okay, we talked climate action now. Okay, climate action now. It needs to be localized. It needs to be specific to the region in which you live in. Okay. The Columbian Exchange did real nasty to us by introducing invasive species around the globe into areas where they were not well suited to producing product that promoted survival of the human species. Okay. We watched ragweed push out so many of the native crops that provided nutrition to the indigenous people, provided food for the early settlers. Okay. Columbian Exchange. So the process is getting back to dealing with a decentralized, localized environmental biomes that support food that supports us. That's why local farmers are so important. They know what food grows here. They know what food grows where you live. Work with them. Learn from them. Food, it's going to be a big issue. We continue to see supply chain issues deteriorate all around the world. This is going to be a problem time and time again until we finally get this resolved. As our oil supplies continue to deteriorate, as our energy supplies continue to deteriorate, as we place more emphasis on lithium battery powered farm equipment as opposed to diesel powered farm equipment, as we start dealing with other issues in supply chains, diesel rigs versus electric rigs, the change in the way the energy distribution is managed. You know, right now we're already having problems with grids simply because of summer heat. Rats are actually pretty good, Lana. It's politicians that suck. You know, that's one of the problems is as much as we want to insult politicians, as long as we want to insult the residents of Washington, D.C., that den of iniquity and criminal behavior, you know, you always want to refer to it as some kind of animal. But the truth is they're worse than any animal. At least social animals like rats understand loyalty to each other enough to help each other survive. Um, can't say the same thing about the folks in Washington. Okay. But remember, folks, pay attention. Family, friends, community. As long as you got those three and enough diversity, you can make anything happen, including surviving the apocalypse. Get out there, find some knowledge, learn something good today. Love you guys. See you in a week. Take care.